And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 129th episode recorded on the evening of Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. I'm your host, Kathy Amos, joined tonight by my co-host, Jeff Marlow. And tonight we'll be previewing the Maryland Terrapins. So we've been previewing quite a few of all of the Big Ten teams. So if there's a team in particular you've been wanting to hear, please make sure you go back and find us on YouTube and look at our historical ones, or find us on your podcast feed and look in the history there. We'll only have one more preview. We'll be doing Iowa next week, and then after that we will be done with the team previews of other teams as well as Indiana. So anyway, that is what we're doing tonight, is the Maryland Terrapins. But before we jump into that, as usual, we will start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Jeff and listeners, for me, I'm going to just go to earlier this afternoon when the TV times are announced for the most of the schedule. There's a couple that are still to be determined, but we have the TV schedule and the times announced, and 13 of our games are going to be nationally televised. So I thought it was just something to highlight, and it made me once again very proud of how our program has really grown in the last really 10 years under Coach Moore. And as a fan, it just makes me know that basketball schedule means that basketball itself is going to be starting right around the corner. So for me, that was my Future Proud banner moment. And our banner moment is, as always, brought to you by Home Field Apparel, the presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes a plethora of lots of podcasts for your listening pleasure, including the Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and the Dribble Drive with Austin Rinder. Home Field is constantly releasing new fields or updating their products for schools in their existing line, so you're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that loves great collegiate gear. And not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School business. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 for 15% off your first order. Again, that promo code is HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Okay.
For our YouTube listeners here, or watchers, that we're adding some breaks in here a little bit because we're going to start adding some advertisements to the podcast feed. So we'll take a little break here to kind of give our friend Ari a chance to insert those when the podcast feed gets uploaded. So let us know what you think of the ads if you listen to it on the podcast feed.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we can get those at a decent time and not in the middle of a sentence. So, all right. We'll move on. So we'll cover a few news items there. Again, it's been only a week since we had our last podcast, and so not a whole lot coming out just yet. However, single game tickets do go on sale tomorrow, which is will be Thursday, October 10th. If you are listening later, it will be on sale again October 10th, Thursday morning, for single game tickets. And from what we're hearing, it may be somewhat limited, just because of, which is really good news, because of all of the season tickets that have already been sold. But if you are looking for single game tickets, go and peek at those tomorrow and see what kind of great seats are still left. The other thing that also indicates that the season is getting ready to start are the new posters. I know for me, myself, I like to get one of the men and the women's, and I rotate them every year, hang them up down in my basement to go with my candy stripe walls and all my other Indiana stuff. So I got mine ordered. So if you're looking for that, go order yours. Just as you know, all of the players get some kind of NIL contribution from the poster sales. So you are helping the students as well. So that's about it for news headline. But Jeff, let me kick it to you for your Marlow's Musing. What is on your mind tonight?
Well, it was nice to see the TV schedule come out. Like you said, 13 national games. So you figure roughly half the schedule is going to be carried nationally. The rest, unfortunately, are going to be on BTN Plus. And so get your PTN Plus.
Flow Hoops.
or Flow Hoops down in Florida. By the way, when we talk about national, Peacock is considered a national telecast. So, if, again, you're going to need your Peacock subscription if you want to watch the Hoosiers a couple times as well. The other thing too, about the tickets, it's more about the way I took it is more about the lower bowl. The lower bowl is getting pre-filled in terms of the season tickets. So if you want to stay in the lower bowl for the single game tickets, you probably want to try and jump on those as quick as possible. Right now, the plan, I believe, is general admission seats will still be at the ends in the kind of the bleachers at each end, and then up in the balcony. But we'll see where it goes from there. From that standpoint, but. So yeah, if you want to try and get seats in the lower bowl, you're going to need to probably get those as soon as possible. And Terry Moore talked about this. For those of you who missed it, she talked about it last week up in Chicago. That the goal is to sell it out. With basically season tickets, and they're is not there yet, obviously, but they're moving toward that. I mean, from where they were just a few years ago. So that was kind of where I wanted to go with the Marlow's musings here as we go through the news items, but obviously we're getting closer to the season. We're about 20 some days away from the season. The first game is November 4th, so we're getting close. We're less than a month.
That's right. All right. Well, we'll take a quick break here before we jump into our overview of the Maryland Terrapins.
How many pauses? I thought we just had 2. I missed this one.
That's what it says in my run sheet. All right. But with
I don't know.
And I don't know how long we're supposed to pause either. So
I think we just need to pause long enough for Ari to insert it. So
yeah, that seems long enough.
So,
okay. Well,
right.
With that, we will move on. And let's talk about Maryland Terrapins. So as usual, Jeff and I will be covering, coaches, history, some team stats from last year, people coming back, who they lost, transfers, and freshmen. So with that, I'll just jump in real quick and start with the coaching bit. Just to, as also said, in case folks missed it, Maryland was picked preseason number 4 in the Big Ten, and number 18 in the current way too early top 25. So
yeah,
they are.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't know if you saw that. Shari Cream actually updated that like a week or so ago, and I'd missed it too until I just was looking at ESPN.com. So, but yeah, that has been updated. And Indiana, by the way, was one of the 3 teams that was in consideration for the top 25.
All right. So lots of movement there. So I myself and our listeners will have to go out and check Charlie Cream's latest too early preseason ranking, although I'm not sure we can still call it the way too early. We can just call it the early ones at this point. So Jeff, let me start here with the coaches, with the coach for Maryland. That is Brenda Fries. Brenda has been there. Coach Fries has been there a long time. She is starting her 23rd year at Maryland. She has a very fantastic record. When Maryland came into the Big Ten, she had really helped set the tone for the rest of the league to really have to catch up with Maryland. So in her time with Maryland, she's gone 582 and 161 for a 78% average overall, and 146 and 29 in the Big Ten, which is good for 83.4%. They do have one national title underneath her in 2006, and she has led them to 4 Elite 8. So definitely some really fantastic history there from Coach Fries. 23 years at Maryland, but 26 overall. She did coach 2 years at Ball State and 1 in where she that takes her overall record up to 639 and 161. So really great history from Coach Fries. And again, she's, in my opinion, one of the better coaches in the league. And I am quite sure that is a big reason why we're seeing them as preseason number 4 or in the top 25 right now, just because of her coaching history and her ability to show that she's able to bring people together. Because as we get in to it, and just to kind of hint around here, they do have a lot of turnover and a lot of newcomers coming into their program. But Jeff, do you want to talk about some of the history for Maryland?
Yeah, I'll hit that too, because I was in my mind is that there's a lot of turnover here, and the last couple of years, Brenda Fries, who's a good coach, don't get me wrong. In fact, when she was at Ball State, the couple of years she was at Ball State was when I first became aware of. She was probably my first or second year of coaching, maybe my second or third year of coaching. She was at the clinic in Indianapolis for the high school coaches, and that was where I really first became aware of. And then she left pretty quickly to go to Minnesota, stayed there the 1 year, and went to Maryland when Maryland was still in the ACC. But Brenda Fries is an excellent coach. But here the last couple of years, they've gone heavy into the portal. There's been a lot of roster turnover in College Park. And I would say even to a certain degree, last year, I'm not sure it was all as successful. Last year, I would say was probably the worst year she had in maybe since her first few years in Maryland. They were 17-14, 9-9 in the Big Ten, which was 8th. Now that snuck them in. They were able to sneak into the NCAA tournament, but that was not the kind of year that Maryland and Maryland fans were used to having at 17-14. They had dominated the Big Ten for a long stretch of when they first came, when they first came in. And so for them to kind of fall back into 8th, so it really tells me a lot of people really think that their incoming people, their transfer people are going to be really good, but they do have a stud coming back. And they also got one of their notable transfers was, basically the Big Ten freshman of the year last year at Rutgers. So, from that standpoint, but so as I said, 17-14 last year, 9-9, their notable wins, they beat Illinois at home, 90-82. And then on the road, 69-53. And they upset Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament, 82-61. So that was probably the game that got them in the tournament more than anything. They were a bubble team, probably a bubble team going into that, but they had some really bad losses. Now, South Carolina, there's no shame in losing to South Carolina, but they got smoked 114-76. Then UConn beat them 80-48. Both those were on the road. Then they lose to Washington State in Cancun, 87-67. Now, again, Wazoo was pretty decent, but then they lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Iowa State, 93-86. So they had some really bad losses. Last year, IU swept the series, 87-73 in College Park, 71-54 in Bloomington. And Maryland does still lead the all-time series 12-5. In fact, IU just got their first win in this series, I think, 3 years ago. The last few years, it's kind of come back toward Indiana a little bit.
Yeah, and help me remember, Jeff, was when we won at College Park last year, was that the first win at Maryland, or was that the previous year? It was last year, right?
I think it was last year.
I think
Don't
so
quote
too.
me 100%, but I think it was last year.
Yeah, I would bet a good $5 on that. So yes, I do too. So let's talk about that, Jeff. With that, some of their stats, because I think we can dive a little bit into what went wrong a little bit for them last year. Which, if what you're saying is going wrong is still, finishing 500s in the conference and getting into the NCAA tournament, right, you've built a really strong program under Coach Fries. Yes, exactly. It's all relative, but you're absolutely right. I think everyone considered Maryland last year to have had a down year. They just didn't seem to gel with all of the newcomers that they've had. So let's talk a little bit about stats. So offensive, that didn't seem to be the problem, in my opinion. They were able to score at a pretty good clip, at just under 78 points per game, which is good for 20th in the country. However, on the other end of the court was part of their problem last year. They allowed 73.3 points per game, which was 333 in the country, and that allowed for only a scoring margin of 4.6. Now, I'm sure, again, like you mentioned, some of those really big blowouts, especially the early ones to South Carolina and to UConn early on in the year, really probably inflated some of those numbers. But again, it's a long season, and to end up with an average of only 4.6 scoring margin probably wasn't where Coach Fries wants them to be. But it wasn't their tempo. They were at 22nd in the country at 76 possessions per game. And again, their offensive rating had them at 18th in the country, but defensive rating only 60th. They shot 44% from the field, which is 49th in the country, 36.2 from three, which was 21st in the country. So a pretty admirable clip there for them on the 3-point line. And they shot right at 77% from the line. However, they allowed opponents to shoot 41.8%, which was 248th in the country, and 30.9 from the 3-point line, which was 177th. On the turnover side, they averaged 15.2 turnovers per game, which is 145th, and only forced 16.6. So again, a margin of only 1.4 in their favor. And 15.2 is probably a little higher than I would think Coach Fries wants as well. And then lastly, in terms of rebounding, they were 38.6 rebounds per game, which was 76 in the country. And they allowed opponents to get 36.5, which was 196 in the country. So their rebounding margin was only 2 rebounds per game. Which I think was probably the other glaring hole besides their defense, was really on the rebounding side. And then in terms of assists, 16.2 assists per game, which is 33rd, and their opponents were 16.6 at 346. So they weren't really allowing their opponents to get a whole lot of assists, but they were allowing them to shoot pretty good from the field. So that might be part of it too. So overall, Jeff, I say looking back at their numbers, which probably contributed to quite a few of those losses, especially those big blowouts, were the defensive end and then the lack of rebounding on probably both ends. So anything that sticks out to you though, Jeff, from your perspective?
Well, it's the defense. You can't be giving up those kinds of points. And yeah, you can talk about the blowouts, but you know darn well they had a lot of bye games on their schedule where they were blowing out their opponents too. So yeah, so that doesn't explain all of it. They just were not a very good defensive team last year, and along with that, they didn't rebound the best, and so that's even worse. You're not playing good defense to begin with, and then you're giving up a lot of opportunities, second and third chances. So with that, so I think that was one of those as well. I'll just kind of move into the returning players here, and we'll start with Cheyenne Sellers. Cheyenne Sellers, 6'2" senior, all Big Ten first team last year, started every game, 30 of 35 starts as a sophomore. She averaged 15.6 per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists. I mean, this is a legit talent. She's probably going to get drafted as long as she stays injury free. She's getting drafted in the WNBA at the end of the year, whether it's first or second round. But I would think with her skill and her length, she's going to be kind of what they're going to be looking for in a first or second round pick. Bree McDaniels, a 5'10" junior, started 25 of 33 games last year, 26 minutes a game, 12.6 points per game, 2.8 assists. And Ali Kubek, a 6'2" forward senior, started 17 games at 22 minutes a game, 9 points a game, and 4 rebounds a game. But Kathy, I would say
Oh, you muted yourself, Jeff. Still muted. There you go.
It all begins. Somehow I got muted. It all begins with Cheyenne Sellers, and as far as the return, and the others are nice pieces, but it all begins and ends with the returns with Cheyenne Sellers.
Yep, absolutely. And I did put together this run sheet, and I put in there that she started all games last year. I think that's wrong. I think she missed one of the games against us when she was injured. I think there were quite a few injuries for Maryland last year where people were in and out, which is why you'll see like Ali Kubik only having 17 games started. Bree McDaniels started 25 of 33 games. I think there were quite a few, and I'm pretty sure that Cheyenne Sellers was out for one of the 2 games that we actually played them. But overall, though, those are definitely the core of the people that are coming back. And, we'll jump here into a minute with the transfers and then eventually the freshmen. Of their 15 players, 10 of them are new. So they only have 5 people coming back. 3 of them had started in some fashion, quite a few games, but I think you're 100% right. And easy for anyone, hopefully, that has watched Maryland basketball last year and the last couple of years, that this is going to probably revolve around Cheyenne Sellers. That's going to be their main one coming back. However, they have some help coming for sure in that transfer portal, as you talked about early on, that they absolutely have some, excuse me, of the some of the better transfers coming in as well. And from my perspective, that starts and ends, I think, right now. Well, probably doesn't end, but it definitely starts with Kayleen Schmeichel from Rutgers. She is a 6-foot junior guard. As you mentioned last year, she was the Big Ten All-Freshman. She was on the Big Ten All-Freshman team. She was also on the second team All Big Ten. When she was at Rutgers, she averaged 17.3 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, and she played in 47 games over the last 2 seasons for Rutgers. But last year, she did only play in 15 games. So again, she had some injury bugs there as well. But she was Rutgers' all-time leading freshman scorer as well. So, just probably one of the headliners of their transfer coming in. So I think, again, trying to bring in a little bit of more height at 6 foot there and a guard. And I believe she's going to have 2 years left. She's only going to be a junior. So that will give them something to build around as well. But thoughts on Kayleen that you want to talk about, and maybe pick up your next transfer you want to talk about as well?
Yeah, if she's healthy, she's a stud. And she's a great compliment for Cheyenne Sellers if she's healthy. And I agree. I forgot about her injury last year. It was 2 years ago that she was on the All Big Ten freshman team. But she's legit talent. And so if healthy, that makes them even, obviously way more dangerous. I'm really going to kind of go down to.
And Jeff, sorry to
about,
interrupt. You might want to move your microphone a little bit closer if you can.
Okay. The microphone, I'm going to go to Sailor Poffenbarger, UConn, Arkansas transfer, 6'2" guard, redshirt junior. So she should have 2 years of eligibility left. She was an all SEC freshman team at Arkansas. She set the Arkansas record for defensive rebounds, started 30 games, 10 points a game, 7 rebounds, 40 blocks. So this is going to be somebody who hopefully they think will give them some size and plays a guard. So I could see them playing a lot of more open post with this group coming back.
Yeah. And the thing that stuck out to me about Sailor Poffenbarger she played for UConn as well in Arkansas, but when she was at Arkansas setting that record for defensive reboundings last year, clearly that seemed to be hitting two of the things that we talked about that seemed to be holes from last year, which was defense and rebounding. And I think we'll talk a little bit later here. Actually, I'll just go ahead and talk about her now. Christina Dalse from Villanova, a 6'2" forward. She's going to be a senior. She was the Big East co-defensive player of the year last year. So between those two players, we're talking about rebounding and defense, which were kind of the holes that we just talked about. And Christine Dalse, again, from Villanova, she got some really great experience there, starting 70 of the 72 games over the last 2 years. And the only thing for her is I'm not quite sure how she'll fit in offensively. She didn't seem to be, maybe she doesn't need to. She doesn't be maybe real strong. She only scored double digits in 14 games. But she did have double-digit rebounds in 18 games. So I think that's an interesting piece to watch where, again, I'm sure that they picked her up because of that defensive presence and helping, between Smichael and probably Bree McDaniels and Cheyenne Sellers. They're going to be able to carry a lot of the offensive load, and that Dalse is probably, I would guess, maybe coming off the bench more for defense than necessarily offensive firepower.
And then I'm going to go to Sarah Tibiasu from VCU, 5'5" guard, 5th year. This will be her last year. She'll be, with that. But she was the Atlantic 10 player of the year last year. She averaged just under 16 a game, 3.2 rebounds, almost 3 assists a game. She's basically started her entire time at VCU. So again, a little smaller guard. I could see her being more put into a facilitator role though. Not saying she can't score, but I would imagine with Smichael, with Sellers especially, they're going to be asking her to do a little bit more of the facilitator role here with Maryland.
Yeah, that's right. So I think between those four, that's probably the headliners, at least from what I could see of their transfers. Now, I'll hit real quick. There are 3 other ones. As I mentioned, they have 10 new players coming in. 7 of them are transfers. So I'm sure I'm going to mess up her name, so I'll apologize now, but I'll give it a shot. Is Minami Ozzy Momundu is coming in from Gulf Coast State. She's a 6'3" forward. She'll be a junior. I mean, she did put up some good numbers, but it was at Gulf Coast. So the question will be, will it translate to the Big Ten? So she did average right at 17 points per game and 11.6 rebounds. Amari DeBerry is coming in from UConn, 6'6", forward senior. So she's definitely bringing in some height for them. She did play in 60 games while she was at UConn in her 3-year. But again, from an offensive firepower, her season high was only 8 points one time against DePaul. However, she was ranked 15th in her class in high school. And, anyone who's played under, Gino for 3 years, I'm sure has picked up some really good basketball IQ. So I could see her definitely coming in as a role player. And then rounding out their transfer class is Mir McLean, also played at UConn for a while, but then at Virginia, 5'11" guard / forward. She's a grad student. The interesting thing that will be coming from her is she did miss last year due to injury. So not really sure what kind of, shape she'll be coming in, wasn't sure on the injuries. But before that, at her 2 years at Virginia, she played in 26 games. Had 12 points per game and 9 rebounds per game. And she was also ranked highly at number 25 in her high school class. So just rounding out those last 3 in the transfers, Jeff, what sticks out to you in any of those 3?
None of them really do. I mean, that's the honest thing. They have not played a lot of games. The McLean was been hurt. DeBerry, 60 games in 3 years at UConn is not a lot of games. I mean, it just really isn't. And so even though she was the number 15 recruit in her class, and you can get stuck on the bench at UConn and just not get, because there's others in front of you. I get that. But there's nothing about those that jump out at me going, ooh. But obviously, Schmeichel and the others we talked about, those I think will be heavy rotation players for them.
Yeah, I do too. I think those three probably are bringing in maybe some between the two seniors. You got some experience there that maybe they're helping to lean on. And then, Isminami as a junior from Gulf Coast State, maybe she's coming in as some developmental for next year. And then maybe the year after she might be looking at more contributing. But let's switch over. They do as well have 3 freshmen coming in, and all fairly high ranked, depending on the rankings that you look at. They are all ranked in the top 50 for sure. So it looks like around 45 or higher. So let me talk about maybe the first one that I believe was the highest one, highest ranked. So Ava McKinney, she's a 6'2" guard or forward. She's from Pennsylvania. She was ranked number 35 by ASGR. In high school, she had first team honoree in the state of Pennsylvania. As a senior, she averaged 13.5 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 steals. And, she's athletic. And, as another guard, she was an all-conference honoree in track in the state as well as a senior. So definitely has some athleticism, it seemed, at least from what I could tell on paper. But any thoughts on her?
I don't know much about their freshmen. I know that they're going to, they're highly ranked, but they're just, it's again, we'll see. Maryland's had some success recruiting in the freshman classes and stuff, but it's been a few years, really since Sellers that they've had, they can go back and look at a really good recruit that has panned out for them and stayed around for a while. The one that intrigues me is Brianna Williams, 6'2" forward out of Billings, Montana. First of all, you don't get a lot of recruits out of Montana anyway. Right. But ESPN had her at number 45 in last year's class. She was a 2-time Montana Gatorade Player of the Year, 25 a game, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 3.2 steals. So all around, it looks like she's got a game. But we'll see how she fits in, and Brenda Freeze and how she, slots in some of these freshmen.
Yeah. The last freshman for them is Kendall Walker. She's a 5'9" guard, staying home from Maryland on ESPNW. She was ranked number 45. The Washington Post did vote her as the all Met Player of the Year for the metropolitan area. She averaged 16 points per game as a senior. So I agree with you, Jeff, at least on paper, not knowing a whole lot of them and looking at who they have coming back as well as the transfers coming in, I would think it would take a lot for any of those 3 to probably see meaningful minutes on the floor, just because, again, of the experience that's coming in with the transfers, the experience they have coming back with the 3 people that we already mentioned. I would expect that we would see more of them in upcoming years, and next year will be, or this coming year now, less than a month, that we'll see they're probably more developmental right now than probably going to get much into the main rotation.
I agree.
Yep. Okay. So, and then, so that are, those are the people coming back, and those are the new people coming in. So let's just quickly talk about the players that they lost. The interesting thing, at least from what I could tell, Jeff, they only lost 4 players in all to graduation. I don't believe they had anyone transfer out. Did you find similar information on them as well? I didn't see anyone that transferred out. Yeah, so they lost Ja'Kai Browner-Turner. She was one of the few people that it looked like started all the games along with Brene Alexander. Then Lavender Briggs, she had started 10 games, and Faith Masonius started 16 games. So 4 of them have kind of lost, but the big ones were probably Ja'Kai Brown-Turner, who was playing around 31 minutes a game and 13.5 points per game. And Brene Alexander was averaging 25 minutes per game at 9.2 points per game. But and then probably Lavender Briggs too. She had 27 minutes. So some big holes there, which makes a lot of sense as to why we see 7 transfers coming in. But what kind of thoughts do you want to talk about on people leaving due to graduation?
Well, obviously they're losing the 3 starters, but I'm not sure those are big losses. I mean, Brown-Turner to me is probably the biggest loss because she was averaging double figures. She was the leading rebounder on a team that struggled to rebound. But as far as Alexander and Briggs, they were complementary pieces for the most part. So I think you can you're fixing some of that with the people you bring in the transfer, especially Schmeichel, some of the others, that we talked about earlier. So, but to me, the big, at least on paper, the big loss is Ja'Kiah Brown Turner, because of what she brought to that team in terms of giving them at least a little bit of a post presence, or somebody who could at least take, grab rebounds and stuff. So again, for a team that was 17-14, the people leaving aren't wowing me. It's not like, wow, if they'd been 28-5, then we'd be like, oh man, a lot to replace. They're 17-14. They weren't getting the job done. So let's see what Brenda Freeze has brought in to try and turn this back around to the type of record she's used to.
That's right. So I think this, just like we're probably going to have to get used to saying this with all of, the transfer portal and so many teams really flipping the roster. Some of them more than others. This team, Maryland and Oregon in particular, are ones that were heavy into the transfer portal. I think, again, the big question for me will be if they can make this team gel, because they didn't last year. Again, not up to Maryland standards. Now, one thing that they'll have in their favor is like several other Big Ten teams. They did take an international trip earlier this summer. They went over to Croatia. And that always seems to be a good thing for teams that have a lot of new players. I mean, it's good for any team in particular. But for a couple of reasons. One, you got all the extra practice time that lead up to this trip. Then you get to actually play some games on the trip, and really just the time spent together traveling. If you've ever traveled with anyone, it really forces you to find out if you're a good fit with people, and either you bond or that it's not going to work. And from what I think I had heard is that it actually went really well, and that a lot of this is really started to bind. Now, does that translate onto the floor? Of course, will be the biggest question for this team. But any overarching thoughts now that we've covered newcomers, people that have left, transfers, people coming back? Jeff, what are your kind of thoughts and expectations for Maryland for next year?
It's just it's a crapshoot right now, and obviously Brenda Freeze has a track record, but they're not. I'm not sold on they're the fourth best team in the league. We'll find out. Now, again, I think they could be, but based on what they did last year with the roster they had, 17-14. Now, again, I know Schmeichel's coming in and you got some of their transfers, but I'm kind of a wait and see here. I'm not, if we were going over under here, I'm not taking the over here. I'm not buying. I'd still be selling on Maryland a little bit right now.
Yeah, I'm in a wait and see as well for Maryland. I was a little surprised that they were picked number 4, to be quite honest, especially over Illinois and Nebraska, who have some, proven talent coming back. Now, again, folks could probably say that maybe both of those two teams underperformed last year. So I think there's a couple factors that maybe bumped Maryland up. And one I had already mentioned was Coach Freeze. I think it's the Coach Brenda Freeze effect. But it didn't, like you mentioned, it didn't happen last year for them. So how much is that Croatian trip really going to help them gel? But maybe we'll talk a little bit about their schedule. And I think that might have had to play with it too. So non-conference, they don't have a whole lot of non-conference headliners. They have Duke at home, Syracuse away, Texas, and that they're going to be playing in January, which was interesting in the middle of the Big Ten season. Their double play will be against what?
TV game.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Their double play will be against Ohio State. So that is a tough draw in terms of, who they have to play twice. But the teams that they have at home are interesting to me. USC, UCLA, Illinois, and Nebraska. So again, if, you're looking on paper, 4 of the probably top 6-7 teams in the conference, they're going to be playing at home. And then away, they have Iowa and Indiana. So I think the schedule kind of broke in their favor, which might also, in addition to the Brenda Freeze effect, and then you have Cheyenne Sellers coming back. I think that might be what's contributing to them having been picked number 4 in the conference. But like you said, it's a crapshoot. I think once you get out of the top 3, that 4 through 8 really could go almost any different way. But anyway, what are your final thoughts on the schedule or anything else about Maryland that you want to talk about?
It is interesting how many of the Big Ten teams are not really taking on a tough non-conference schedule.
That's right.
Because I think they've realized the conference schedule is going to be a grind. I mean, especially bringing in USC and UCLA as 2 of the 4 new teams, and with where they are as top 5 teams, I think a lot of teams looked and were like, let's not overload ourselves. There are going to be a lot of top tier games to build your resume for the tournament. You're not going to have to really go outside the conference to build that this year, or as like you had in the past. So I think Maryland doing what a lot of teams. Indiana's really only got one marquee game at least on schedule. That's Stanford. And luckily that game's at home. But you talk about the home and away, getting USC and UCLA, just like Indiana, both those teams coming to your place. That's a positive. Not saying you're winning, but it's a whole lot easier to win in your place. Yeah, a whole lot easier to win in your place than on the road, which also means, though, like Indiana, they're also going to Oregon and Washington, not the two toughest teams in the league compared to the other two. So they caught a little bit of a break with their road games being against maybe some of the softer part of the competition besides Iowa and Indiana, but they're also going to go to Oregon and Washington, who are not expected to be top half of the teams in the league. So the schedule is going to break in their favor a little bit. But again, I'm just not sold they can beat the teams like Illinois and Nebraska on a consistent basis yet. I got to wait and see. They're going to have to show me a little something this year. Last year, I think I believe that Brenda Freeze would be able to put it all together. They made the tournament, don't get me wrong, but it was a down year by Maryland standards. And so I want to see what happens this year.
Yeah. And we keep saying, yeah, they made the tournament. I feel like they kind of squeaked into the tournament.
They did.
I don't know if they don't have that win against Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. I don't know that they make it. If not, I think they're in the WNIT. I really think they were that close, that much of a bubble team. And then to go in and lose to Iowa State right away in the first round too.
They were often in the first four in or first four out down the stretch of the season. That's
right. Yeah, they were definitely bouncing around that bubble mark for sure. So without that win, I don't think they get in. So it definitely was a down year for Maryland. And again, let me caveat too. I know I said they lost to Iowa State. Iowa State was a good team last year, and they will be very good this year too. So,
and had a nice run in the tournament.
They really did. Yeah, they really did. So, any overarching thoughts that we haven't hit on, Jeff, for you for Maryland? If not, I think we can probably wrap it up. All right.
All right. Here's another pause for Ari to put some commercials in.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and cover off what's next. So up next, our next show will be a week from today on October 16th. We will, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are going to dive into our last team that we are previewing, which is the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, Jeff and I did not cover all 18 teams. I think we covered quite a few of them, though. We're well over half the teams, I'm quite sure. For those of you who are interested in the other teams, if you haven't been listening to the Dribble Drive with Austin Render, he will be or has been going through almost every team, and he will cover off a total of all 18. So you can go and pick up those other teams with his preview if you're interested. But Iowa Hawkeyes will be our last one because I'm tight. And then after that, we will only have bless you. We will only have two more scheduled non-season shows. So after that, on the 23rd, we'll go into the IU schedule. And then on October 30th, we will be doing our own prediction show of what we've already kind of made a few predictions sprinkled here and there, but our official predictions will come on the 30th. Then if there are any still lingering questions that any of our audience members have out there, start thinking about them, write them down, shoot them our way, because on the 30th, we'll also include any kind of ask me anything if you want to have any other questions. But anyway, next show, October 16th, Iowa Hawkeyes. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.com/BackHomeNetwork. You can be part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logos. A big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard through the broadcast. And most of all, thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you in 1 week. But until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
Hey, Kathy, real quick, I'm going to cut in here. IU football off this week, 6-0, bowl eligible. Limited seats available for November for Nebraska next week, the 18th, 19th, or 18th, 19th. Limited seats, homecoming. I got my tickets. I'll be there. So, come around the Hoosier football team.
You just keep rubbing it in. That's nice. I can't make that either. But and hey, to my mom. Hi, Mom. All right. All right.
40
Look at
minutes.
us go. 40 minutes. Hurry, end it.
We're getting better at this.
Yes. I
Well,
was
see,
wondering if we'd go a little longer with this one because they just have so many. I can't believe that 10 of 15 new players. And that just still baffles me on finishing, like having them picked fourth. But
Right.
I think when we sit down and maybe look at some of those other teams and some of their schedule, I still think that maybe their schedule might be a little easier than some of the other teams that like Illinois and Nebraska. That's the only thing I can come up with.
Right.
That and the proven history of Brenda Fries. So
the other thing too is I'm gonna say there, just you gotta wait and see. But I was thinking we did the 4 West Coast teams, we did Ohio State, we did Illinois, Nebraska.
Yep. Indiana.
So that's Indiana and now Maryland. So I think we did about half the teams.
Did you say Ohio State?
Yeah. We did the 4 West Coast teams, Ohio State, Illinois, Nebraska, and then Indiana, and now Maryland. So we basically covered half the conference.
Yeah, more, because then we'll do Iowa. That'll be 10 of the 18. So we're just over halfway. So. Yeah.
Right,
that's a lot of teams.
Hey, we're going to roll out of here. See you, everybody.
Yep. Good night, everyone.